They made a movie that grossed $200 million. Most of this cast was paid less than a car payment for it. One of them was already a drug addict at 11. Another nearly killed himself driving into a tree. 53 years later, this is where they all are. Paul Le Mat, who played John Milner, the aging drag racing king slowly realizing his best days were already behind him, and who very nearly ended Richard Dreyfuss's career before it started. He was 26 when he was cast.
Is this what they call copying a field?
What? No, get up! Oh my God, don't say that!
Born on September 22, 1945, in Rahway, New Jersey, a Vietnam veteran and trained stage actor whose lived-in weariness gave Milner a tragic authenticity no technique alone could fake, the kind of quiet exhaustion that only comes from having actually lived through something, not performed it. One night during the shoot, Le Mat picked Dreyfuss up by the arms and legs and threw him headfirst into the shallow end of the Holiday Inn pool as a joke. Dreyfuss gashed his forehead on the bottom and could have broken his neck, and makeup crews spent the next morning covering the wound before his close-ups.
I didn't joke around with Richard Dreyfuss. He was very serious. I grabbed him and said, "Do you want to try it?" And he said, "No, no," and I threw him in the pool.
So that I got a big, thing on my forehead.
Harrison Ford, involved in the same round of horseplay, ended up arrested the same production. Le Mat also suffered a serious walnut allergy attack severe enough to require hospitalization during the shoot. He earned a Golden Globe and an Oscar nomination for Melvin and Howard in 1980, playing real-life eccentric Melvin Dumas, and returned for the 1979 sequel before settling into a long stretch of steady character work through the 1980s and 1990s. He is around 80 today, alive and largely out of the public eye. John Milner was the soul of the whole film, the cool kid who already knew his moment had passed. Paul Le Mat nearly ended a future Oscar winner's career with one prank, and then quietly built a respected one of his own. Cindy Williams, who played Laurie Henderson, the emotional center the entire film was built around, and who died so suddenly in 2023 that it stunned a cast who had stayed close for 50 years. She was 25 when she was cast.
You're disgusting! Get out of my car! Get out! Lori! I told you never to mention that!
Born Cynthia Jane Williams on August 22, 1947, in Van Nuys, California, one of a wave of unknown young actors Lucas assembled to give the film its authentic Northern California texture. The chemistry she found reading opposite Ron Howard in the audition room was immediate and undeniable, and Lucas built the emotional spine of the film around it.
What is wrong with you? You're acting like a snotty little bitch who wants everybody to...
What did you call me? I screen tested with Ron Howard, and I think we did the dance scene.
Afterwards, she landed Shirley Feeney opposite Penny Marshall in Laverne and Shirley, one of the most watched sitcoms of the entire decade, running 8 seasons. She married musician Bill Hudson in 1977. The marriage collapsed by 1982, and she fought through a painful divorce and custody battle, largely without public sympathy at the time, raising her 2 children afterward, largely on her own. She and Ron Howard stayed genuinely close for the rest of her life. On January 25, 2023, Cindy Williams died after a brief illness at 75. Laurie Henderson was the heart of that whole cast on screen. Cindy Williams was the heart of it off-screen too, and when it finally gave out, everyone who'd stayed close to her for 5 decades felt it at once. There's a version of this story where the Modesto kids all cash in and coast. That's not what happened to any of them. Richard Dreyfuss, who played Kurt Henderson, the intellectual torn between staying home and leaving everything behind, and who very nearly died living out his own worst chapter a decade later. He was 24 when he auditioned.
She spoke to me right through the window. I think she said, "I love you." You have no romance, no soul? Someone wants me. Someone roaming the streets wants me. Will you turn the corner?
Born on October 29, 1947, in Brooklyn, New York, one of more than 100 actors who read for the film, and walked into that audition room and told George Lucas, plainly and without hesitation, everything he thought was wrong with the script. Lucas was so struck by the confidence that he let Dreyfuss choose whichever role he wanted. Dreyfuss picked Kurt. What followed was one of the fastest rises in Hollywood history. Jaws in 1975, Close Encounters of the Third Kind 2 years later, then the Best Actor Oscar for The Goodbye Girl in 1977 at just 30, the youngest winner in Academy history at the time, a record that stood for decades afterward. Then came the fall. A severe cocaine addiction through the early 1980s ended in a 1982 crash when he drove his car straight into a tree at full speed and very nearly didn't survive the night. The wreck became his rock bottom. A bipolar disorder diagnosis followed years later, and he turned the whole ordeal into one of Hollywood's most outspoken mental health advocacies. 3 marriages, 3 children. Kurt Henderson was the moral conscience of an entire film. Richard Dreyfuss became the youngest Best Actor winner in Academy history, and then nearly killed himself, proving a trophy doesn't fix anything underneath it. Mackenzie Phillips, who played Carol, the smart-mouthed 12-year-old riding shotgun through the whole film, and who was already a drug addict a full year before a casting director ever noticed her hitchhiking on the side of a California road. She was 12 when the film was shot.
They call copying a field?
What? No, get out, you know.
Born Laura Mackenzie Phillips on November 10, 1959, in Alexandria, Virginia, the daughter of John Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas. A casting director spotted her hitchhiking alone on the side of a road, brought her in on a whim, and cast her almost on the spot. Because she was a minor, the production was legally required to assign her an on-set guardian at all times. What that guardian never knew was that Phillips had started using drugs at 11, a full year before filming began. She landed one day at a time afterward and became a genuine teen television star at the height of the show's popularity, but the addiction only tightened its grip, costing her role on the show itself and job after job through the 1970s and 1980s as producers grew unwilling to insure her. In 2009, she published a memoir containing an allegation that stunned the country, that her own father had abused her for years, a claim that split public opinion and dominated entertainment news cycles for weeks. She has stayed sober since, rebuilding her life from the ground up 1 year at a time. 3 marriages, 1 daughter. Carol rode through 1 perfect night without a scratch. Mackenzie Phillips was already fighting for her life before the cameras ever rolled, and it took her another 3 decades to finally win. Ron Howard, who played Steve Bolander, the class president torn between staying with his girlfriend and heading off to college.
All right, Bolander, you are suspended. You're out. You're out.
Fruit. I graduated last semester. Remember?
And who nearly turned the role down because his agent's pitch confused him into thinking it was a musical. He was 18 when the film was shot, born Ronald William Howard on March 1, 1954 in Duncan, Oklahoma, and had already spent a decade as the single most famous face on the set, having grown up on national television as Little Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show. He nearly turned the role down entirely when his agent described the project. Howard misunderstood and became convinced it was a musical, a genre he had zero interest in.
My agent told me it's a musical. He said, well, it is a musical. I said, well, I can't sing. He said, it doesn't matter that you can't sing.
He was paid $6,500 for the entire shoot with no profit participation, on a film that would eventually gross more than $200 million worldwide. He used the momentum to land Happy Days, then made the defining pivot of his career, stepping permanently behind the camera and building one of the most respected directing careers in the industry. Apollo 13 in 1995. A Beautiful Mind in 2001, which won him the Best Director Oscar in 2002, along with dozens of other credits spanning nearly every genre Hollywood makes. Married to Cheryl Howard since 1975, 4 children including actress Bryce Dallas Howard. He is 72 today, worth an estimated $200 million. Steve Bolander spent 1 night deciding whether to leave Modesto behind. Ron Howard spent the next 5 decades proving that walking away from what made you famous can be the smartest career move anyone in that cast ever made. Before we get to the rest of the cast, a question for the comments. Which scene still gets you? The drive-in, the cruising strip, Wolfman Jack's voice crackling through the radio, or that final shot of the plane taking off? Tell me which one below. Every arrest record, paycheck, and cause of death in this script came from a primary source before it made it in. Subscribe if that's the standard you want more of. Charles Martin Smith, who played Terry the Toad Fields, the awkward scooter-riding nerd who somehow lands the most beautiful girl in town for one magical night.
Hi. Hello. Buenos noches. You need a lift somewhere?
I did a cold reading. stone cold. I hadn't seen the script, nothing.
And who built one of the most genuinely surprising second acts in the entire cast once the cameras stopped rolling. He was 18 when he was cast, born on October 30th, 1953, in Van Nuys, California, and became the comic and emotional backbone of the film through his bumbling chemistry with Candy Clark, the two of them producing the single sweetest and most heartbreaking storyline in the entire movie, returning for the 1979 sequel as the only character whose fate carried real weight across both films. Almost nobody discussing this cast ever mentions what came next. He headlined the cult classic Never Cry Wolf in 1983, earning serious dramatic credibility far beyond his Toad reputation, then moved permanently behind the camera, directing Air Bud, Dolphin Tale, and dozens of television episodes across more than 50 years of continuous, committed work in an industry that chews through most careers in 5. He is 72 today, alive and still working. Terry the Toad was written as the loser of the group. Charles Martin Smith spent the next 5 decades quietly proving that nickname was never true, one steady decade of work at a time. Kathleen Quinlan, who played Peg, a small supporting role with barely any screen time and no obvious reason to launch anything, and who went on to build one of the most respected dramatic careers her entire generation produced. She was 17 during her feature film debut, born on November 19, 1954, in Pasadena, California, absorbing everything the small role had to teach her about a set that nobody involved believed would matter, comforting Cindy Williams's character through a tearful breakup scene that took up barely a few minutes of the finished film. Critical acclaim arrived with I Never Promised You a Rose Garden in 1977, in which she played a teenager battling schizophrenia, and steady, serious work followed through the 1980s and 1990s across film and television alike. Then, in 1995, everything came full circle. An Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress as the wife of astronaut Jim Lovell in Apollo 13, directed by Ron Howard, the same man she'd stood beside in a tiny role 22 years earlier on a project nobody believed in either. She also delivered a striking, unsettling turn in Oliver Stone's The Doors, playing Jim Morrison's longtime partner Pamela Courson. Married actor Bruce Abbott, one son. She is 71 today. Peg comforted a heartbroken friend for a few minutes of screen time in 1973. Kathleen Quinlan spent the next 22 years building toward an Oscar nomination alongside the very same director who first stood beside her on that low-budget Modesto set. Harrison Ford, who played Bob Falfa, the arrogant, out-of-town racer daring the whole town to a duel, and who showed up to set with a tool belt because a decade of Hollywood rejection had already pushed him out of acting entirely. He was 30 when he was cast.
Hey, you're supposed to be the fastest thing in the valley, man, but that can't be your car. It must be your mama's car. I'm sorry.
Born on July 13, 1942, in Chicago, Illinois, an age Hollywood at the time considered the end of the line for anyone still chasing a break. He'd quit acting entirely years earlier, after a decade of rejection, and was working as a carpenter doing cabinet installations for casting director Fred Roos, who kept insisting to Lucas that this carpenter could actually act. Ford turned the role down once over the insulting pay, before Lucas raised it to $500 a week, roughly $2,000 total for the entire shoot. During filming, he was arrested after a bar fight and spent a night in a California jail cell, and separately refused to cut his hair for the 1962 setting, wearing a Stetson through most of production just to hide it. Then came Star Wars in 1977 and the role of Han Solo, then Indiana Jones, then Blade Runner, Witness, The Fugitive, Air Force One. Decades of stardom nobody standing on that low-budget Modesto set could have predicted for the man in the tool belt. Survived a private plane crash in 2015, 3 marriages, 5 children. Bob Falfa never lost a race worth remembering. Harrison Ford spent a night in a jail cell during filming and walked out to become the biggest movie star alive. Wolfman Jack, who played the disc jockey whose growling, blues-soaked voice tied the whole film's one perfect night together, and who wasn't acting at all, Lucas built the entire concept of the movie around a real man's real radio voice. Born Robert Weston Smith on January 21, 1938, in Brooklyn, New York, he was already a 34-year-old broadcasting legend by the time Lucas tracked him down, having spent years howling across the California desert on a signal blasted from a powerful Mexican border station strong enough to reach nearly every car radio in the state after midnight. He was paid only a modest appearance fee, though Lucas, once the film made him enormously wealthy, quietly sent Wolfman Jack a personal bonus out of his own pocket as a private thank you. Afterward, his fame expanded into national television hosting, alongside continued radio dominance through the 1970s and 1980s, including a long-running stint as the on-air voice for the Midnight Special, and years of syndicated programming that kept his growl a fixture of American nightlife. He married Lou Lamb in 1961. They had 2 children. On July 1, 1995, Wolfman Jack died of a heart attack at just 57, collapsing at his home in Belvidere, North Carolina, shortly after returning from a promotional tour. The disc jockey's voice was the thread that held one fictional night together. Wolfman Jack's real voice had already been holding together a real generation of late-night American radio listeners for decades before Lucas ever thought to write him into a script. Bo Hopkins, who played Joe Young, the intimidating yet oddly honorable leader of the Pharaohs gang, and who spent the next 5 decades quietly becoming one of the most reliable villains in American film without most audiences ever learning his name. He was 34 when he was cast, born William Malden Hopkins on February 2, 1938, in Greenville, South Carolina, and had already broken into film with an unforgettable role in Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch in 1969, after joining the Army at 16 and working his way through local theater and an off-Broadway production of Bus Stop, where he picked up the nickname that stuck for the rest of his life. His rough Southern charm made him the industry's dependable choice whenever a director needed a believable tough guy, lawman, or weathered villain, and he racked up more than 100 film and television credits across genres, from Midnight Express to American Anthem to The Killer Elite, becoming one of the busiest working character actors of his generation, without most casual viewers ever learning his name. He married Sean Eleanor Green in 1989 and stayed married to her for the rest of his life. 2 children survive him. He suffered a heart attack on May 9, 2022, and died 3 weeks later at Valley Presbyterian Hospital in Van Nuys on May 28, 2022, at 84. Joe Young ruled the Pharaohs for one night on screen. Bo Hopkins quietly ruled character actor Hollywood for 50 years, and almost nobody outside the industry ever learned his name for it. Candy Clark, who played Debbie Dunham, the free-spirited blonde who lit up every scene she was in, and who earned the only Academy Award nomination of the entire young ensemble, while being paid less than $5,000 total to do it. She was 25 when she was cast.
How am I gonna get home?
Born on June 20, 1947, in Norman, Oklahoma, with exactly 1 film credit and no industry connections when she walked into a cattle call audition for a low-budget project nobody expected to matter.
I had heard that they were going to film this film, American Graffiti, and it took place in the 50s, so I thought, this time I'm gonna dress up, and I'm gonna go in costume, and they're gonna see me, and they're gonna think I'm perfect.
She won the role of the free-spirited Debbie Dunham almost by accident, one of dozens of young actresses reading that same day. She poured everything into the role across 28 brutal consecutive night shoots, earning roughly $300 to $400 a week, under $5,000 total, with 0 residuals and 0 profit participation, on a film that would gross over $200 million. She returned for the 1979 sequel, kept working steadily in films including The Man Who Fell to Earth alongside David Bowie, and built her own real estate and limousine business on the side that owed Hollywood nothing at all. 2 short marriages, no children. She is 78 today, alive and well. Debbie Dunham was written as the bubbly, scattered one. Candy Clark was the only person in that young cast serious enough to walk out with an Oscar nomination and smart enough to build a business the industry could never touch. They filmed it over 28 nights in the summer of 1972 on a budget of about $750,000 on streets and drive-ins across Northern California, standing in for a Modesto that had already started disappearing by the time the cameras rolled. It grossed over $200 million worldwide and earned 5 Academy Award nominations, including one for Best Picture. Today, several faces from that one perfect night are gone. One who died suddenly in 2023 after 50 years of friendship with her co-star. One whose growling radio voice went silent at 57. One who ruled Hollywood villainy for 5 decades before a heart gave out at 84. The rest are scattered across California, still working, still occasionally asked about a summer nobody on that set thought would matter to anyone beyond themselves. It mattered to all of them. It still does.